Hi folks, today I'm going to teach you how to boneless. Now, the boneless was one of the first tricks that I ever learned, simply because it requires a lot less effort than the ollie, but it's tricky in its own way. It's a nice trick that you can throw into a line without people expecting it, and if you get really good at them, you start doing, like 4 sets and 6 sets, it can be really impressive. And it's just one of these tricks that you don't see as often anymore as, say, an ollie or a kickflip, and that's why I wanted to focus on the boneless. That and my ollies are shockingly bad, and I can't kickflip yet, but I'm working on it. While I'm not good at a lot of traditional street style tricks, I am a freestyle skateboarder, and I do a lot of stuff like this. Now, to make this easy, I'm going to break it down into 3 steps that you can follow to learn the kind of motions on how to boneless, because the difficulty in the trick is not landing on the board, it's getting the board into the air in the first place. It's tricky to kind of step off with the foot and boost the board into the air using your arm. It's not a very intuitive motion for someone that has, begun learning skateboarding. Like, you're told to ollie and you're told to roll around, and there's very few people out there that will tell you to, touch the board with your hand. So it is a little bit tricky to get started with, and the dismount at the start and boosting the board into the air is by far the hardest bit. Where people think that's the easiest bit, that's the hardest bit, and the easiest bit is just putting your foot back on the board at the end. So like I said, I'm going to break this down into 3 steps that you can learn so that you can start to boneless. So the first step is learning how to step off your board without your back foot popping the board into a tailstop. And what I mean by that is you need to learn how to take your front foot off the board while the board is still rolling. So essentially, learn to balance on the board using your back foot. Now, the reason this is so important is because if you're too far back on your back foot, i.e. your back foot is on the tail, when you try and take your front foot off, it's gonna go straight up into a tail stall, and that's either going to cause you to fall off or slow down to the point that you're going to have no speed when you actually scoop your boneless. In terms of the foot placement, I'm going to go over where I put my feet. Now, this is not the only way to do it, but it's the way that I find the easiest for getting the scoop, getting into the air, and then landing back on the board after you finish. So for foot placement, I usually put my back foot across the pockets just below the back bolts, but not far enough up that I'm standing on the tail. So for the front foot, all you really want to do is just get it out of the way for the plan to boost the board into the air. And the easiest way I've found to do that is to kind of position your front foot on the bolts, but with your heel hanging off the side of the board. So if you're regular, that means the heel hanging off the left-hand side of your board. If you're goofy, that means the heel hanging off the right-hand side of your board. Just makes it easier to step off when you do the boost into the air. So once you've figured out the foot placement that you're most comfortable with and your stance, it's time to move on to learning how to boost the board into the air. So the first step is essentially stepping off the board and stepping back on the board while it's moving. So what I showed you a few minutes ago, where you step off the board with your front foot and grab the board, we're essentially going to learn to do that rolling without boosting the board into the ground and without, leaning back onto the tail and the tail touching the ground. Because those 2 things will cause you to fall and will slow down your boneless if you do manage to boost it into the air afterwards. Once you can do that without falling off pretty smoothly every time that you try it, that's when you want to move on to the second step. The second step is learning how to get the board off the ground safely so that you can secure a solid landing, and that's the third step. So to learn this, I'd recommend learning it stationary first, and essentially what you want to do is grab the board and just practice stepping off, jumping up, and landing on the ground. Now, your front foot doesn't have to land back on the board, as long as you get the motion of going from the boneless position, so bending down, grabbing the side of your board and boosting into the air, and then landing on the ground. The important thing is to try and keep the board as level as possible for this. Now, I know you've probably seen people do bonelesses where they tweak it out and it looks all cool. That's great, but that's like way in the future. To begin with, you just need to learn how to get the board off the ground safely, and to do that I'd recommend trying to keep it as level as possible. Now, it will feel awkward, but this is the part of learning any kind of trick. It's going to feel super weird, super awkward to begin with, but once you get a fluid motion going, you'll see the benefit of it, because it gives you a solid landing spot when you do go to eventually land the trick. The board's going to be straight, and you're not going to have to contend with turning your body too much. Third and final step is learning to put your foot back on the board and boosting into the air. So you need to jump in this last step. So we're combining the second step, but we're actually jumping into the air and then putting the front foot back on the board when we land. Now this can be super scary, so if you're not too comfortable doing it on concrete, it's fine to learn it on grass for the time being till you get your foot placement down, you get a feel for the trick, and then slowly progress up onto concrete. There's nothing wrong with that. And I would recommend that if you're scared about sliding out when you're doing this trick. And yeah, so the third step will look something like this. After you've learned the third step, all that's left to do is string all the steps together to get a fluid boneless. Once you've learned the basic boneless, there's a whole bunch of variations that you can do that can spice up the trick and help you tackle obstacles and just add some flow to your lines. The boneless can also be done from the tailstop position to add a little bit of variety into your freestyle lines. Another cool variant you can learn is a footplant boneless, where you plant your foot on an object while you're bonelessing over it. I'll do a separate tutorial on this, but it is a progression that I think naturally makes sense and can add some distinct flow to your line. Another cool variant of the boneless footplant is the boneless vault that you can do off of objects, walls and rails. Again, I'll do another tutorial on this at a later date. The last footplant boneless variant I want to show is the Madonna Boneless, which borrows from the Madonna transition trick, as it has a similar kind of motion. I hope this tutorial helped you out, and if it did, consider supporting the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Skate safe out there.